In this video, I'll describe the 4 variables affecting shadow edges, but I'll also describe edges for the shade and the reflected light. Check out my book, The Art Instruction Course, where the Kindle is only $5. There are several variables that affect the sharpness of shadow edges. One of the most important is how close the shadow is to the casting object. So here the box on the wall is very close to the wall, so its shadow is very sharp and dark. This one is from a windowsill that we don't see, so the casting object is far away, making this a soft-edged shadow. A second variable that affects the edges of shadows is that shadows that are close to us tend to be sharper than those further away. But here in backlighting, we have a problem because the shadows, as I said, are sharp close to us, but they are also sharp when they're close to the casting surface, which is back here. So the result is that the sharpness of the shadow doesn't change very much with backlighting. A third variable that affects shadow edges is how intense the light is. So if the light is intense, we have hard edges. If the light is dimmer, then we have soft edges. And this is an example of dimmer light, and we get sharp shadows near the casting surface, but in this backlighting, we lose the sharpness as it comes toward the viewer. So as opposed to backlighting, where I showed you the edges might not change much, with front-lit shadows, the edges change a lot. And this is a picture where the light is behind the viewer, and the edges in front are the sharpest because they're in front and also because they're closest to the casting person. So there are 2 reasons for it to be sharp here, and then it gets very soft as it moves away from the casting surface and from the viewer. And similarly here, these are sharp shadows, and then they get very soft very quickly. Now, another variable for shadow edges is how the light hits the surface. So if the light is fairly perpendicular to the surface, this lighting probably is coming down in this direction. So it's pretty perpendicular to this horizontal surface. So these become the hardest shadows. And the light is hitting these columns at a small angle. So these shadows become softer. Now let's talk about the edges on the shade and shadow of a sphere. So these orange lines represent light rays that just graze by this sphere, and it grazes all around the sphere so that it forms what I call a terminator on the sphere that divides the light area from the shade. And these light rays also go down and define the shadow. Now generally, the terminator is relatively soft edge and the shadow is relatively hard-edged. These pictures show that the terminator is usually softer than the shadows. So the terminator in this ball probably goes around here, and this is the shade, and this is the light area, and the halftones are like this. So the terminator is pretty soft. But look at this shadow from the pipe. That's really sharp. Similarly, in the tree, these are the halftones. This is the shade and the light area. But look at the shadow. That too is really very sharp. The terminator gets sharper as light intensity increases. So here we have a relatively soft terminator, and here we have a pretty hard terminator. It's almost as hard as the shadow here. And the harder it gets, the more angular this round form looks. Reflected light depends on how close the objects are to each other and how light they are. So this ball, the light is coming down like this. It's hitting this ball. It reflects light here, and then it comes to our eye. So this light gray area is the reflected light, and it has a fairly sharp edge. And then this next line here, this gray line, is the terminator. and then the area in front here are the halftones. You can also see that there's a sharp shadow right here. Here are some variables that affect the sharpness of shadow edges, terminators, and reflected light. And in all cases, when we have intense light, the edges of all of these sharpen. Now for shadow edges, they sharpen as they come near the casting object and near the viewer, and we get both of these with backlighting. Also, when the light is perpendicular to the casting surface, the shadow edges are the sharpest. Terminators are sharpest with intense light, and they are, by the way, always perpendicular. Terminators are always perpendicular to the light. For reflected light, they are sharpest when the two objects are close together and when they are light in value. So remember my book on Amazon, and please remember to subscribe.